in Mark, not John, which it is open at, so give me a moment. And we're at Mark 15 this evening, verses 16 to 20. The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is, the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. This is the word of the Lord.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Just come back with me 8 years to 2016. Can everyone still remember the referendum debate leading up to the vote of whether or not we should leave or remain within the European Union? Can you remember the time? I knew families that were divided. I knew husbands and wives that wouldn't speak to each other. I knew a wife that kicked her husband out of the bedroom because she fundamentally disagreed with his intentions. Do you remember how it divided us? And how we mocked each other? Some of those that wanted to leave were mocked as atavistic little Englanders looking for John Major's 1950s dawn mist in a church lane. The others who wanted to stay were mocked as people who didn't understand democracy, who wanted to give away our rights. Because basically what it came to was, what nation are we? What do we want to present to the world? What do we hope to be? Are we better, part of something big, or can we do it on our own? And it was painful, and there was mockery and dismissal, and it's still here today. Or the Scottish independence referendum, do you remember that? When the Scots were trying to bring themselves out of the Union to rule their own nation, and they were mocked because they couldn't answer, what currency would you use? And how would you use it? Now come with me even further back to the nation of Israel. This was also a nation that had its ideas of what it was and what it should be, because it's God told them what it was and what it should be. If you faithfully obey the voice of your God, be careful to do all that I command you. The Lord God will set you high above the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you obey. That's one. There are many more that tell Israel that God has set them high in the nations. That it actually says they will stream to you, they will grab the hem of your garment and say, take me to your mountain, take me to your God. And yet it hadn't happened. They were not independent. They had been ruled and ruled and ruled. And then, not long, they remembered the Maccabean revolt. Has anyone heard of this? It was the time when they were ruled by a man called Antiochus Epiphanes. He was a Seleucid. And what he decided to do was desecrate the temple, to bring in pigs, to go into the Holy of Holies. And there was a rebellion by a guy called Judas Maccabeus, 167 to 160. And if you remember the festival of Hanukkah, it's in honor of him winning, capturing Jerusalem, cleansing the second temple, the one that Jesus stands in the porticos, the one we're hearing about here. This is that temple. And Israel was independent. God had come to them. Now they were going to rule and reign. And then Rome comes on the scene. Now imagine what would have happened if we vote to leave and the European Union got together, and France and Germany and Spain and all the rest said, we're not letting you leave. Just imagine they'd put troops on our streets and told us under no uncertain terms that we, England, were finished, that there was no parliament, that we had been a rebellious nation and they were going to punish us for our audacity. I wonder how we would have taken that. Would we have rose up? Would there have been a man that would eventually have risen to try and take us with him? Because here, in this reading, what you have is this hope of Israel being mocked. These are probably Syrian auxiliaries. Rome used them. They would have used the neighbours around, and Syria knew full well, like it does today, what Israel's prophecies were. That they were going to be the top nation. They were going to rule. God was coming for them. The Syrians knew it. And now in front of them was the Jewish king, the representative of this, the one who was going to lead them, the one who was going to say, Brits, follow me, we'll kick out the European armies. Here he is. All the pretensions of Israel laid bare, all their hopes for independence, and they had him. Oh yeah, some king are you. So they mock him. It's the human thing we do the most, is mockery. We mimic, we put down, we use humour. It's a way of humiliating someone else. If anything I know about talking to people about where school's concerned, they hate being mocked. Hate it. They hate when people mean to them. Or, someone does that when you're talking. We hate it. Yet they have him now. Israel's hope. The Syrian auxiliaries have Israel's king. He was going to lead them, was he? He was the one that was going to bring back this glorious kingdom, that make them the nations of the earth. Now they've got him. So they make a crown of thorns about that big, and they put a purple robe on him, because they're now saying, oh yeah, you're a king. Hey. And we've just sang, the armies fight for me. They weren't fighting for him then. God was silent and watching. He doesn't intervene. No angel armies come to save him. He's alone and being mocked. And something rises up with us when we want to defend those being mocked and bullied. We want to get involved, to stand. We do. So they put a crowns on him. They put a purple robe on him. It says they hit him regularly on the head, driving those nails ever further in. Then they fall on their knees. Hail, King of the Jews. Which is why I think the Jewish leaders objected to Pilate putting that on it. It was a way of saying the Jewish pretensions to a king, their Jewish hope. This is what happens to it. Because we are Rome. We are the most powerful nation on earth and would be kings. This is what happens to them. So don't you think, Israel, for 1 second, you're going to be free and independent. This is what Rome does to your king. And within it, the Syrians then would have just mercilessly mocked him, because they had him. The one, this is the hope, and God is silent. And so they beat him and mock him and have a go at him. It says they hurled insults at him, shake their heads. They shake their heads, they hurl insults at him, repeatedly hit him on the head and mock him. And when they've had their fill, they know now what's next. They take off the purple robe because, hey, and put his own clothes back on him. And that's saying, you're dismissed. Remember King Charles's coronation when they put all at him and they strip him down? And he has to stand there to remind himself he's only mortal. Which, of course, when he's told he's got cancer, we realise he is a mortal man. So they've taken off the purple robe and put back on his own clothes. Then they lead him out to crucify him. The mockery, the spectacle, they've had their fill. They've enjoyed what they've done. And our God is silent. Because the idea of kingship, and this was so hard for these disciples to get, and sometimes I think for us, when we look at our world, and we see what kings and rulers do, when we see what Putin is up to, when we see how many have died at the hands of Assad in Syria, but it says the kingdom is not of this world. This was a king whose kingdom would come not by might of arms, but by mockery, by being led out, by being nailed in humiliation to a Roman tree. And we'll come to that later, so I don't want to jump. But I'll say this. All the pictures you see of Jesus with a loincloth, they're false. They had crucified him naked, because the idea was to humiliate you utterly, to mock you, to show your pretension for what it is, that a burning sun would burn your skin, The birds, if they wanted to peck at you, could, because there's nothing you could do to defend yourself. Nothing. And so the mockery is one in which the sheer brutality of man comes out. And you see, it's hard preaching them this from Matt because you want to go on, but there's more yet to come when he's nailed to the cross. And I don't want to take away anybody else's sermons. But remember, the crown of thorns, they set it on him, and it would have dug right into his head, and he would have bled, and it would have hurt. And every single time they hit him, it would have gone even further in. And we concentrate often on that, the physical aspects of it. Because we go, oh, but look at the mockery too. In the midst of his pain, they take the absolute mickey out of him. Hail, King of the Jews. They fall, sorry to repeat, they took off the purple robe, they put his clothes in, and they just lead him out. They've had their fun, but they have no concept that some way God is at work here. God's purposes for the coming kingdom are here. So actually, it's strange they indeed have in their hands Israel's promised Messiah. He is that person. He has come. He is the one. But they have him, and they mock him, and they deride him, and they dismiss him. Because where's his army? Where's his kingly chariot? Where is Henry VII on a beachy that draws up an army to bring the Tudor dynasty in? Where is it? It's nowhere. So what do you do with a pretender to a throne? You mock them. And last week we looked at Pilate and the machinations of politics and who was what. And Pilate himself knew this. He was a provincial governor of a provincial area. He didn't want to be there. He wanted to be in Rome. Because that's where the power was. So the reason I brought up the idea of the referendum is we tend to think politics plays no place in this, but it does. This is politics between Herod, between Pilate, between all of them, all moving about, trying to jockey for position, trying to be the one. Because Pilate knows, Herod knows that he can't kill. So look, we also read of Stephen being stoned in Acts. So they can kill people. And what they would do is they would push you off the cliff. And then you'd land. And if you didn't get up, that'd be fine. But if you did, they would then drop a rock on you from the height. And then that didn't kill you. They'd then just keep throwing stones at you. But they can't kill for a political offence. Only Pilate can do that. And the Jewish leaders knew they needed to get him on this charge of sedition, of undermining Rome. But like the referendum, you have to be careful how far you go. Because no, the Jewish leaders were not going to deny that Israel believed it will one day be an independent kingdom. It will have this Messiah. He will overthrow Rome. This is why I think Pilate's playing the game he plays. He knows full well what these Jewish leaders believe. And yet he knows the political machinations that are going on, so he plays the game with them. And in the end, like Jess said, Jesus is just a Jew. What's one more Jew? What's one more Jew? Off you go. And the mockery starts. The crown of thorns are pushed on. And he's alone now. The disciples have fled. And let me ask you as I come to a close, if you are mocked mercilessly, what would you want to do? Do you remember Back to the Future? When Biff constantly mocks Marty McFly's dad? Do you remember it? And right at the very end of the film, what does Marty McFly's dad do? He punches Biff, doesn't he? Smacks him one. And the whole of the history changes. That's what we want to do. We want to smack people who mock us. We want to slap them and see how hard they are. Jesus just takes this because he's already known, as I stop, that this is his Father's will. No angels are coming to rescue him. No victor's crown just yet. No strongholds have fallen. Nothing has been shaken. But somehow, the eternal God, the one so holy and true and just, is in the hands of those he created. And all they can do with him is mock him, deride him. And yet, this is part of God's whole plan. The King has come. Crucify the King. Long live the King. And I'll stop there because next we come across the next time that as he goes out what happens to him as they take him out with that cross, because you carry your own beam thing across your back. And then we'll begin to see the effects physically of the beating. We'll see the effects of the mockery. We'll see the effects that it has and how the people also begin to mock him too. The mockery continues. It doesn't stop here. It carries on. So as Christians, I suppose, it does behove us. I like humour. I do. I like a great joke and I like banter. But I suppose it also tells us Christians that perhaps sometimes we ought to be careful of how we mock other people. The kind of way we pull them down and put them down. That's not saying we can't disagree, but there's certain ways perhaps as Christians we should think about how we use this to mock other people. And I finish there, because otherwise I'll nick next week's sermon. So now, you've had the machinations. You've had him in the hands of Pilate. You've had him in the hands of Herod. They've handed him to the Syrian cohort. They've whipped him, beaten him, put a crown of thorns on him. And now they're leading him out to crucify him. Let's pray.